Hi, welcome to World Unknown. Today we are going to explain tips and facts about New York. Come on, let's get started. 10 tips for your first trip to New York City. Whether you grew up in the heart of the city or are a country girl at heart, New York City will make your jaw drop. As one of the craziest, most exciting, beautiful cities on the planet, the Big Apple has everything you have ever dreamt of and more. Figure out your budget. New York City is one of the most expensive cities in the world, but it can also be surprisingly affordable if you plan it out right. Before you go, do some research to create your own must-do and must-see list to start pricing things out. Get familiar with the neighborhoods. Both in population and sheer geographic size, the city is absolutely massive. Learn about the boroughs and neighborhoods you are visiting before you arrive. The 5 boroughs are the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, Staten Island. Every area has its charms and there are countless neighborhoods in each one. Far too many people spend their whole trip to Manhattan. While it's a fab spot, it is not the whole picture. As you are creating a list of things you want to do, separate them by borough, then plan your days to minimize commute time. Find a hotel in a convenient area. Of course, you will save some cash if you book a hotel on the outskirts of the city, but it's just not worth it. If you are only in town for a few days or a week, you don't want your time to be eaten up by getting into the city. Your trip will be much more enjoyable as well if you can stop by the hotel to relax and change his clothes anytime. You will likely do a lot of walking, so there's a good chance you'll want to refresh before going out for the night. Make it easy on yourself. Don't be afraid of public transportation. Taking the subway in New York is a cultural experience. In fact, it is one of my top things to do in NYC if you want to get a sense of the heart of the city. While it might not be the most comfortable way to get around, especially in the summertime, it's a melting pot of people. Everyone uses the subway, and there are even live performances at some of the stations. You will never forget your commutes. The subway is a major time saver. Hello, NYC traffic, but it's not a magic portal. You can spend ages on the train if you are traveling to far-flung spots. Spend some time on Google Maps to get a sense of the actual travel time and where certain spots are located in proximity to one another. If you haven't traveled by subway much, there are a few things to keep in mind. First up, avoid any empty trains. If no one is using a particular wagon, it's probably got something gross going on, has a broken AC, or some other issue. Once you are in your wagon, grab the handrail, and you might want to pack some hand sanitizer, to make sure you are secure on your feet. Keep an eye on your stuff and make sure it is always in your line of sight. If you are lucky enough to get a seat, hold your bag on your lap or between your legs. If you are in NYC for 4 days or more, the unlimited week subway pass for $32 is well worth it. You can go anywhere you want for a week. Just keep in mind that it's just for one person, you can only swipe every 18 minutes. How to call a taxi. While the subway is great, there might be times that you just want to grab a cab. To call a taxi in New York City, stand on the curb and put your arm confidently up and stand there intensely looking at the cars. Be careful to make sure you aren't standing at a bus stop, as taxis can collect passengers there. Try the local food. NYC is worth it for the food alone. You could literally eat every meal in the city for a year and never have the same thing twice. It's impossible to narrow it down to my fave local food, but pizza and bagels are a must-eat while you are in NYC. You will hear so many different recommendations for the best bagels and pizza in town. My recommendation? Try them all. Places like Joe's Pizza, Bifara Pizza, and B-Side Pizza are local institutions, while H&H Midtown Bagels is another staple. And all over town, there are places where people will gladly stand for an hour to pay $5 for a slice of pizza, and it's completely worth it. Markets. Another thing I love to do in any city is sample my way around local markets. Gansevoort Market, they've been going since 1884 and having amazing pizza and ice cream, and Chelsea Market are two essential stops for any foodies. Hot dogs and pretzels. Just about every street in New York has a stand selling hot dogs and pretzels. They are the perfect greasy treat to keep you powered as you roam the city. If you are looking to go all out, Kat's Deli has been serving up some of Nike's fave hot dogs for more than 100 years. Italian. New York City cuisine was heavily influenced by Italian immigrants, and they've left an indelible mark. To try some of the best American Italian dishes, check out Briscola. Tip. If you are coming from outside of the US, prepare to tip everywhere except fast food restaurants. Generally speaking, if someone comes to your table, they are expecting you to leave 15% as a tip. Don't cause a traffic jam on the sidewalk. Most New Yorkers get from point A to B on foot. Forget about the rules of the road, here it is all about sidewalk etiquette. Much like the road, on the sidewalk, slow foot traffic stays to the right. Give space for people to pass on the left. When you live in a tourist-heavy city, it's frustrating to have big groups taking up the whole width of the sidewalk. If you want to stop to look at a map, stand near the buildings and out of the way. Dress for the city. While wearing Sex and the City-inspired outfits might be the dream, I'd suggest saving your carry gear for the evening and keep it simple during the day. If you really want to explore and experience the city, you'll be doing a lot of walking, meaning you'll probably want to rock sneakers over Manolo Blahniks. The weather in NYC varies a ton. It can be -10 or 100 degrees Fahrenheit when you are in a sticky hot subway or a snowy and windy street. You really feel it. Check the weather before you go and pack layers. Know that you can't do everything. No matter how many times I visit NYC, I barely seem to put a dent in my bucket list. There is just so much to see and experience. We will never see it all, so it's all about prioritizing. Narrow it down to the things you just can't wait to do. As I mentioned in my post about travel burnout, it is not about the number of things you can check off your list. It's about enjoying your experience. If you have a blast just laying in the grass in Central Park for 3 hours, do you? Know that you can't do everything. No matter how many times I visit NYC, I barely seem to put a dent in my bucket list. There is just so much to see and experience. We will never see it all, so it's all about prioritizing. Narrow it down to the things you just can't wait to do. As I mentioned in my post about travel burnout, it is not about the number of things you can check off your list. It's about enjoying your experience. If you have a blast just laying in the grass in Central Park for 3 hours, do you? Interesting facts about New York State. New York is the 4th most populous, the 27th most extensive, and the 7th most densely populated of the 50 states of the United States. It lies in the northeastern United States. New York attained statehood on July 26, 1788, becoming the 11th state to join the Union. Its 6 bordering states are Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Waterborder, Vermont, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. New York, nicknamed the Empire State, has 62 counties. The state's capital is Albany. The city is divided into 5 boroughs, which are each a county of the New York State. It was in 1898 that the 5 boroughs were combined into a single city. The 5 boroughs are Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island. Manhattan and Staten Island are islands, Brooklyn and Queens are geographically part of Long Island, and Bronx is attached to the U.S. mainland. After Hong Kong and Seoul, New York City has the 3rd most number of high-rise buildings in the world. Isn't this an interesting fact about New York City for a skyscraper enthusiast? New York became the first megacity in the human history when its population surpassed the 10 million mark in the 1930s. New York City has a moderate climate. The average temperature in January is about 31 degrees Fahrenheit and in June is around 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Brooklyn, the city's most populous borough, was an independent city until 1898. Manhattan is the city's most densely populated borough and no doubt has the largest concentration of the city's skyscrapers. Queens is the most ethnically diverse county in the United States thanks to its large population. Geographically, it is the largest borough in New York City. Staten Island is the most suburban borough among the 5 boroughs in the city. New York was one of the original 13 colonies that formed the United States. The first people arrived in New York around 10,000 BC. New York City is the most populous city in the United States and the New York metropolitan area is one of the most populous in the world. Buffalo is the 2nd largest city in the state after the New York City, while Mechanicville is the smallest, by area, of all. The Statue of Liberty is in New York. The statue is a symbol of the United States and its ideals of opportunity, democracy, and freedom. Did you know that the Statue of Liberty was a gift to the United States from France? Did you know that the 7 spikes on the crown of the Statue of Liberty represent the 7 oceans and the 7 continents of the world, indicating the universal concept of liberty? In 1886, it was the tallest iron structure ever built. Albany, the state's capital, was the site of the first European settlement in New York. Albany became the capital of the state in 1797. It is also the longest continually chartered. A charter city is a city in which the governing system is defined by the city's own charter document rather than by general law. City in the United States. On April 30, 1789, George Washington was sworn in as the President of the United States at Federal Hall in New York City, New York. 8. Until 1960, New York State led other states in the U.S. in terms of total population, culture and economic indexes. And then it was overtaken by California due to enormous growth that the later state witnessed. Niagara Falls, one of the most famous waterfalls in the world, is located on the border of Ontario, Canada, and New York, United States. 10. The Hudson River is named after the sailor Henry Hudson, who sailed into the state in 1609, on his ship the Half Moon. The Hudson River separates New York City from the state of New Jersey. The Hudson River flows entirely within the New York State except for its final segment when it forms the boundary between New York and New Jersey. Adirondack Park in New York is larger than any other national park in the U.S., outside of Alaska. The park covers an area of 28 million acres. New York State was called New Amsterdam initially when it was discovered and settled by the Dutch. However, it was later conquered by the British and its name was changed in the honor of England's Duke of York. The United Nations is headquartered in New York City. New York State has had 4 constitutions. They were adopted in 1777, 1821, 1846, 1894. The Constitution of 1894, revised in 1938 and amended over 200 times, remains in place today. The New York Stock Exchange and Nasdaq both call the city their home. And mind you, these are the world's 2 largest stock exchanges by total market capitalization of their listed companies. Big Board is a nickname for the New York Stock Exchange. NYSE Canada is an important economic partner of the state. The United States got engaged in a military conflict with the British Empire between June 18, 1812, to February 18, 1815. The New York, Canadian border was the central front of the war. The 3rd floor of the Assembly Library of the State Capitol building caught fire on March 29, 1911, at around 2:15 a.m. The cause of the fire is thought to be faulty wiring or tossing of a cigar. However, nothing was confirmed. Toilet paper was invented by Joseph Gaiety of New York City. The first American chess tournament was held in New York in 1843. Tofanic Falls is the tallest single-drop waterfall in the state of New York. The New York State Canal System consists of 4 canals, the Erie Canal, the Oswego Canal, the Cayuga-Seneca Canal, and the Champlain Canal. The system, which is 525 miles long, is located in 17 counties in upstate New York, excluding New York City. The system sees very less commercial vessels and is primarily used for recreational and flood control purposes. There is a secret train station, known as Track 61, below the Waldorf Astoria, which is the most famous historic hotel in New York City. During the 1930s, the train station was built for the secret entrance of former U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt to the hotel. New York City also houses the world's largest railway station, the Grand Central Terminal. Its construction was completed in 1913. The station has 44 platforms, situated on 2 underground levels. The station covers 48 acres of land. Consider yourself half lucky if you have lost your belongings in Grand Central Terminal. The reason is that the Grand Central Lost and Found has a 54% return rate on most items and an 80% return rate on high-value items. Manhattan, New York City, is home to the largest concentration of Chinese in Western Hemisphere. Here, 150,000 Chinese residents live in a 2-square-mile plot of land. New York State's Liberty Island, where the Statue of Liberty is set, is home to the first hospital in the country. The hospital was opened on the island to house the immigrants who were considered physically unfit and too ill to enter the country. Hyde Hall Bridge is the oldest documented, covered bridge in New York State and the U.S. It was built in 1825 and is one of 21 historic covered bridges in New York State. The Metropolitan Museum of Art is the largest art museum in the United States and also one of the most visited art museums in the world. It was founded in 1870 by Richard Morris Hunt and others. Today, the museum is one of the world's greatest art centers. The museum showcases over 5,000 years of art from around the world. Fiorello LaGuardia, acclaimed as one of the greatest mayors in American history, was born in New York City, New York. He was the 99th mayor of the city. LaGuardia Airport is named after him. Did you know that the Hudson River flows two ways? The river flows for 315 miles and empties into the Atlantic Ocean. Because of the low and high tides, which the river usually experiences twice every 24 hours, the direction of its flow reverses. A rising tide causes the river to flow towards Troy, northwards, and a falling tide causes the river to flow seaward, southwards. The river also forms the boundary between New York and New Jersey for 21 miles. George Eastman, the founder of the Eastman Kodak Company, was born in Waterville, New York. He popularized the use of roll films, which later became the basis for the invention of motion picture film stock in 1888. New York is the largest Northeast state in both area and population. The Empire State Building, measuring 1,454 feet from the base to the antenna, is a concrete example of human potential and engineering marvel. From the two observation decks on its 86th and 102nd floors, you can see New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. The building took only 1 year and 45 days to build. The final rivet shot in the building was made of solid gold. Almost all of the state north of the New York City is referred to as upstate New York by the local residents. New York is the only state that borders both the Atlantic Ocean and the Great Lakes. Did you know that virtually every skyscraper built in New York is the result of hard work and fearless attitude of the Mohawk iron workers? The iron workers belonging to this tribe have an innate talent to withstand pressure and complete their task while working on great heights. Did you know that more than 4,000 farms have been lost to real estate development in the state since the 1980s? New York stands second only to Vermont for maple syrup production. New York is home to the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, One World Trade Center. The building has 104 floors and its top reaches a staggering 1,776 feet, which is also the year of the U.S. independence. The building was recently completed in 2014. During its planning stages, the building was also referred to as Freedom Tower. Albany International Airport, ALB, established in 1928, is the oldest municipal airport in the U.S. Did you know that there are 11 long and thin lakes: Conesus, Hemlock, Conatus, Honio, Canandaigua, Keuka, Seneca, Cayuga, Owasco, Skaneateles and Otisco, in the upstate New York? These lakes together are referred to as Finger Lakes. These lakes are oriented on a north-south axis and are mainly linear in shape. After Washington, New York produces most apples in the country, followed by Michigan, Pennsylvania, California, Virginia, North Carolina, Oregon, Ohio, and Idaho. Did you know that after the Brooklyn Bridge was complete and was opened for the public to use, 21 elephants, 7 camels and 10 dromedaries, basically furry camels, crossed the bridge to demonstrate that the bridge was safe and ready for use? The elephant stunt had to be performed because a woman fell from the bridge, causing a stampede that killed 12 people. After this news broke out, people generally believed that the bridge was unsafe and thus the elephant walk came into being. Did you know that a 16-year-old named Karen Thomas hijacked a train and drove it for 3 hours before being arrested? Before he hijacked the train, he studied the MTA manuals and planned for months. More than 5 million people ride the New York City subway every weekday. At 85.1 miles long, Delaware Aqueduct, an aqueduct in the New York City water supply system, is the longest tunnel in the world. It supplies water from Rondout Reservoir to the Chelsea Pump Station before ending at Hillview Reservoir in Yonkers. The tunnel was completed in 1945. The New York City subway has the most stations, 468. Shanghai and Beijing come in second and third respectively in regards to stations. Beijing has the highest ridership and the longest route length. New York was the first state to require automobiles have license plates in 1901. However, these plates were made by individual owners, with the owner's initials, rather than being issued by state agencies. In 1903, the first state-issued license plates were distributed in Massachusetts. New York tops the list of the states with the biggest per capita tax burden, followed by Connecticut, New Jersey, California, and Illinois. New York State measures about 1% of the landmass of the U.S. However, it contributes almost 8% to the country's GDP. New York is the only state that mines wollastonite, which finds its application in automobile brakes, paints and plastics, metallurgical brakes, and ceramics. However, the deposits are also found in Arizona, Idaho, Nevada, California, Utah, and New Mexico. Did you know that Manhattan's population density is the highest of any other individual American city? The city is home to almost 40% of the entire state's population. Did you know that there are 400,000 more women than men in New York City? In New York City, a child is born every 4.4 minutes and a life is lost every 9 minutes. If compared to the national average, the average commute time is 14 minutes longer for New Yorkers. The average rent of an apartment in Manhattan is $3,700 per month, which is almost double the cost of renting an apartment elsewhere in the U.S. Did you know that in 2017, the total value of the New York City property was accessed at more than $1 trillion? There is no wonder that the city as of 2017, was home to the highest number of billionaires of any city in the world. The headquarters for the U.S. financial industry, also known as the Wall Street, is based in the city. At a selling price of $238 million, the most expensive home sale ever in the United States was accomplished in Manhattan in 2019. Ken Griffin, the founder of the hedge fund Citadel, bought the penthouse covering an area of 24,000 square feet overlooking Central Park. However, this is also a fact about New York City that these costly penthouses are hard to sell. Hence, the property developers are breaking these apartments into smaller units to make them cheaper. Tourism is an important industry for New York City, which attracts plenty of visitors each year. New York City is the world's only city with more than 100 billionaires. It is more expensive to park a car long-term in New York City than it is to rent a house in many other U.S. cities. It costs more than $600 a month to park a car in the city. The top 5 rich zip codes belong to New York City. The yearly tuition fee for kindergartens and private preschools in New York City is more than that of Cornell, Harvard, and Princeton. Just Google the fee and you will be amazed, if not shocked, to know the truth. The first underground subway line in New York City was opened in 1904. The subway system is one of the world's most used, and one of the world's oldest public transit systems. It is also the one with the most stations. The subway system has stations located throughout the boroughs of Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens and the Bronx. The Staten Island Railway is the only rapid transit line in the New York City borough of Staten Island. It is interesting to note here that there is no direct rail link between the SR and the subway system. Commuters can use free Staten Island Ferry to reach Manhattan. The Staten Island Ferry provides 22 million people a year with ferry service between St. George on Staten Island and Whitehall Street in Lower Manhattan. New York City's subway system is home to more than 15,000 types of life forms, including rodents, insects and even bacteria. The study, which was conducted over a period of 18 months, collected DNA samples from handrails and benches across 466 stations, and concluded that the most common living form on these items were the bacteria that cause food poisoning and urinary tract infections. However, the levels detected did not pose a public health risk. The city's subway system handles more than 1.7 billion people each year. If you were to ride in subway without change of trains, you would take a train from 207th Street in Manhattan to Far Rockaway in Queens. The total distance covered during the journey is more than 31 miles. According to some estimate by subway authorities, the all-time high ridership was in 1946, when 2.067 billion people used the subway. About 60% of the subway stations are underground. The city is also known as the melting pot of the world due to the fact that people belonging to many countries and races can be found here. Italians make up the largest ethnic group in New York City. New York City also has the largest Jewish population outside of Israel. New York City is a heaven for coffee lovers. The city has the most number of coffee shops with free Wi-Fi per capita. New York City is also dubbed as the coffee shop capital of America. According to a report, the city has the nation's 15th most expensive cappuccinos. It should be no surprise that New Yorkers drink 7 times more coffee than other cities in the U.S. Did you know that more than 3 million residents of New York City are foreign-born? At least 800 different languages are spoken in the New York City, making it the most linguistically diverse city in the world. Times Square is named after the New York Times. Originally, it was known as Longacre Square until 1904. The Longacre Square originally served as the early site for William H. Vanderbilt's American Horse Exchange. Due to the development of the area in the subsequent years, and the use of advertising and street lights, the place became safer and more inviting to the general public. The Wyckoff Farm is the oldest building in New York City, dating back to 1652. The house was inhabited by the Wyckoff family until 1901, and today it functions as a museum which is dedicated to the city's Dutch heritage. The iconic yellow taxis that run throughout the city were originally red and green. The first gasoline-powered cab company had red and green cars in its fleet. The yellow color for the taxi fleet was adopted in 1912 by New York City after many other states in the U.S. did so. Central Park is the largest and the most important public park in Manhattan, New York City. In 1856, the 340 acres of land for the park was acquired for a sum of $5 million. After almost 20 years of work on the park was officially opened in 1876. Central Park attracts more than 40 million visitors annually. Did you know that the first pizzeria in New York City opened in 1895? An Italian man named Filippo Milone brought the dish to Manhattan, New York City. However, the credit for bringing pizza to the city, or rather the country, goes to another Italian man named Gennaro Lombardi. This man, who supposedly received his license to sell pizzas in the city in 1905, is still selling pizza slices on Spring Street in Lower Manhattan. The name of the original pioneer of the pizza shops in the nation was lost in history because of the fact that he did not have any children who could carry on his pizza business, and the matter rested to peace after his death in 1924. Today, you can eat pizza from more than 1,600 pizza restaurants in the city. There are more than 22,000 restaurants in the city. The Wall Street Journal and the New York Times are 2 of the 3 national daily newspapers with largest circulation in the United States. The New York Police Department is the largest police force in the United States. The department has strength of more than 35,000 sworn officers. This is a very inspiring and motivating fact about one of the greatest cities in the world. The New York City Department of Education provides free meals that are available daily for any New Yorker. There are more than 400 meal hubs across the city, and any New Yorker can visit one of these hubs and collect their meals. This meal service is for everyone, including adults and children. There is no registration or ID required to pick up the meal. Interestingly, New York City is also home of Albert Einstein's eyeballs, which were removed during an autopsy by pathologist Thomas Harvey. However, the exact location of his eyeballs is still unknown to the common man. It is illegal to honk your vehicle's horn in New York City. Seriously. But this law is clearly not enforced. Now, if you are an avid book reader like me, you would want to visit the New York City Library if any time you are in the town. Because it is the third largest library in the world with a collection of more than 50 million books. That's too much for a lifetime, isn't it? New York City is a pet heaven. The residents own an estimated 1 million pets, including some 600,000 dogs. Now that's roughly the population of Louisville or Baltimore. Did you know that a taxi medallion in New York City at one time peaked at over $1 million? A taxi medallion is a permit that allows taxicab drivers to operate in the city. The system keeps in check the number of taxis available in the city to avoid congestion and ensures better earning opportunities for the cab owners or drivers. At one time, it was the best investment in America. However, due to the evolution of peer-to-peer ride-sharing and app-based car services, the price of medallions has dropped substantially. Another amazing fact about New York City is that nearly 380,000 pedestrians enter the heart of Times Square each day. The world's largest deposit of monetary gold can be found in the vault of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The gold is worth an estimated $200 billion. However, very little of it belongs to the U.S. government. According to some estimate, the United States has about 5% of its gold stored there. The vault is home to about 25% of the world's gold reserves. PONY stands for Product of New York. If you liked this video, please hit the like button. If you want to see more videos, hit the subscribe button. And if you have something to say, please leave a comment. Thanks for watching this video.